The fourth bridge is actually backing up who we are. People 50 years from now think it remarkable that, wow, people in 2018 actually went through the day without backing up their mind file. You wouldn't think of doing that with your smartphone or any of your digital information. And more of our lives are actually reflected that way. These are brain extenders to some extent. I mean, who could do their work or get their jobs or keep their health without the brain extenders we already have? We are going to extend the neocortex in the cloud. That's a 2030s scenario. I thought about this model that I mentioned earlier, the hierarchical structure of the neocortex, for really 50 years. In 2012, I wrote How to Create a Mind, which describes in more detail and with a lot more evidence now from neuroscience as to how the neocortex works. And it's basically 300 million modules, each of which can learn a pattern. So it's not one big neural net. It's 300 million self-organizing modules. And they organize themselves into a hierarchy. So that's what I'm doing at Google. They asked me to basically develop this model and apply it to language. If you have a smartphone and use Gmail, you'll notice it gives you 3 suggestions to respond to each email. It's called Smart Reply. That's from my team using this hierarchical model. And it has to understand the meaning of the email in order to give appropriate suggestions. Another software you can try out that's using this sort of rough model of the neocortex is called Talk to Books. So you can Google that, Talk to Books, and it will give you a link. You can go there and ask any question. What is love? When will we have radical life extension? And the software will then read 120,000 books, 600 million sentences, in a half a second, which is pretty good. I mean, it takes me hours to read 100,000 books. And it'll give you the best excerpts that answer the question. So you can try that. We had an expansion, if you remember, 2 million years ago of our neocortex. We were doing a very good job of being primates, but evolution said to itself, this neocortex is pretty good stuff. And so it increased the size of the enclosure and we got the frontal cortex. Up until recently, it was thought that that was different because it does different things. My thesis has always been it was just additional quantity of neocortex. That has really now been verified by, for example, the European Brain Reverse Engineering Project. So remember what we did with it 2 million years ago? We were already doing a good job being primates, so we put it at the top of the neocortical hierarchy. And as you go up the hierarchy, things get more interesting. At the very bottom layer, I can tell that's a straight line. At the top level of the hierarchy, I can tell that that's funny, that's ironic, she's pretty. So we put it at the top of the neocortical hierarchy. The hierarchy got bigger. That was the enabling factor for us to invent technology and science, language, music. No other primate does any of these things. But that was a one-shot deal. It was enough to put us over that threshold to create technology, including life extension, the conferences on life extension. But if the enclosure kept getting bigger, birth would have become impossible. In fact, it grew to the point where birth was challenging, but still possible. We're going to do it again, but not by increasing the enclosure, by connecting wirelessly the top layers of our neocortex to the cloud, to synthetic neocortex in the cloud. We're already really using synthetic neocortex. Some of these projects I just mentioned are examples of that. We'll have very good models by the 2030s, and we will be able to connect wirelessly, just the way your phone connects wirelessly to the cloud. Your phone is actually, it's about 1 trillion times more powerful than the computer I went and used at MIT. I went to MIT because it was so advanced it had a computer in 1965. Your cell phone is about 1 million times more powerful. It's about 1 million times less expensive. That's a trillion-fold increase in price performance. But that's not even the most interesting thing about it. It expands its capability 1 million-fold again by connecting to the cloud. All the interesting things it does in the cloud wirelessly. We'll do that from our brains, but not just doing things like search and language translation directly from our brains, although we'll do that, but to actually connect to additional neocortex. So just like 2 million years ago, it'll be an expansion of the neocortex, but this time it won't be a one-shot deal because the cloud is not limited by a fixed enclosure. It's doubling in capability every year as we speak, and that will continue. So the non-biological portion of our intelligence will continue to grow. Just like we did 2 million years ago, we'll create new forms of expression that we couldn't understand without that neocortical expansion. Try explaining to a primate that missed out on this neocortical expansion 2 million years ago the meaning of a song, or the meaning of this conference, or of a scientific paper. You could talk all day, or all decade. They just don't have the neocortical capacity to understand it. So we will create new forms of music, new forms of expression that we couldn't understand today. That's where we're headed. And one of the features of digital information is that it's backed up. It's not a metaphor to say there's actually information in our brains that represents our experiences, our memories, our skills, our personality. And it's, we're just used to the idea that when the hardware crashes, the software goes with it. And we've built a whole edifice of philosophy around that concept. We'll be backing up the digital portion. It won't take that long at exponential growth for the non-biological portion of our thinking to be so intelligent it will be able to fully understand and model and back up the biological portion as well. So that's the fourth bridge to radical life extension. And we're very much on track. In fact, the hardware for AI, for strong AI, Ben Goertzel calls it artificial general intelligence. I think that's an implicit criticism of artificial intelligence, that the field really hasn't been going after general intelligence. I would maintain that the steps we're taking are in fact getting us to AGI. That's the right approach to use, but at any rate, we're very much on track. The hardware is growing exponentially at an even faster pace than computation in general. There's a recent study that showed the amount of computation available for deep learning is doubling every 3 months, 16 times faster than computation in general. We've already surpassed the amounts needed to do functional simulation of the brain. My calculation is 10 to the 14th calculations per second. Hans Moravec and other thinkers have the same, using different derivations, have come up with the same figure. The TPU board from Google, which is a small board, has over 10 to the 16th. It's over 100 human brain equivalents on a small board, and you can access that in the cloud. We have the hardware. The software is more challenging, but we're very much on track. That's a long discussion. But we're very much on, I believe, where I thought we would be when I wrote The Singularity is Near, and also Age of Spiritual Machines in '99, on all these three major exponential revolutions: biotechnology, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence. So the last point I'd like to make before I take your questions, I've been thinking about how does this reflect itself on human life. My books have been nonfiction books that talk about these trends and sort of global nonfiction terms, but what does it mean for a person? So I wrote a story, a novel, called Danielle Chronicles of Superheroine. It's my first novel, that is about superintelligence as reflected in a person, basically a young girl. It's a thought experiment, that's what I explained in the preface. What if there were a Danielle in the world? There was this girl that had superintelligence. What would the impact be? And she's quite remarkable, but she also has an impact that rubs off on the people around her, and she solves major problems just with her intelligence, her passion, her devotion to making life better. And there are two nonfiction companion books that come with this. That's kind of a literary first. One is called How You Can Be a Danielle, and that's a major theme of the book, that anyone, including a child, can change the world. And we see that. College kids started all the major tech companies we have worth trillions of dollars that have transformed the world. But we're now seeing high school kids do this, and I talk about that in the book. So there's a whole companion book called How You Can Be a Danielle. That's actually a free book on the web. If you go to danielleworld.com, you can read that whole book. And there's another nonfiction companion book that's also on danielleworld.com called A Chronicle of Ideas, which is 800 essays giving my spin and Danielle's spin on all the ideas in the book, everything from Jimi Hendrix to cancer stem cells to string theory to Alice in Wonderland. So that's there as well. But the major, and then, so in the preface I describe how this is a thought experiment. And I ask, is there a Danielle in the world today? Well, in part, everyone can be a Danielle by applying their intelligence and their passion to solving the grand challenges of humanity. That's really one of the goals of Singularity University. And then I said, okay, but in part, can anybody have the broad range of intelligence that Danielle has? And I say, perhaps not yet. This is a thought experiment as to what would happen if there were a Danielle. And then I say, we will all become Danielles by 2045. So that's the Singularity.